Yes, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jack Farmer, his name is Andy Rossi, and this is the Evolution of Movies show. Andy, how are you doing, big fella?
I'm doing good, big fella. I'm doing well, medium fella.
Good to know. It's always good to chat with you. Now, this week, this year, we have a fun guest that we are good friends with, that we've known for a long time. I've been anxious to get him on the show, anxious to get his perspective, anxious to get his view. Someone who's funny, clever, witty. Let's quit dilly-dallying and let's bring him on. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Tommy O'Sullivan, DJ Woo-hoo! Tommy O. Tsunami O. Tommy, how are you, buddy?
I'm great. Did my mom write that intro? It's very glowing.
She did.
She did. I had to edit it down a little bit.
Yeah. There wasn't enough about my cute butt, so
right.
Thank you for that editorializing.
She led with that and talked about that the most. Kind of a weird amount, but in any case, I'm glad you're on. As I said at the top, you are someone both Andy and I have known for a long time. We've always gotten along famously, so I'm glad you took the time to be on the 50th biggest show about movies on all of podcasting.
Ooh.
Is that true? How's the ranking?
I have no idea. Probably not even top 50.
Okay. I was like, it seems like a popular category. So
I think we could keep saying that though, and it's like no one's going to argue with it.
Yeah,
you could Field of Dreams your way up the chart. So.
Fake it till you make it. You know, some people have gotten very far in life by just saying that they're the best. And so, yeah, we're the number one movie podcast in the entire planet, Evolution of Movies.
And in our territory.
To find documentation that proves otherwise, I'm going to keep saying it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
But I'm glad you're on. This is going to be a fun episode. Thanks
for having me.
If people are new to the show and have never listened to it before, it's the Evolution of Movies. And what we do is we watch a movie and then we talk about it book club style, but we call it the Evolution of Movies because we always pick a movie that came out 1 year after the last movie we watched. So we start the season in 1980, then we go to 1981, 1982. Now we're all the way up into 2005. Back in a time when theaters were filled with hits like Coach Carter, Batman Begins, and of course, 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Trying.
Oh,
but we aren't talking about any of those. We're talking about The 40-Year-Old Virgin, a movie IMDb describes as goated by his buddies, a nerdy guy who's never done the deed, only finds the pressure mounting when he meets a single mother. Tommy, have you seen this movie before, and what were your thoughts going into it this time around?
You know, I have seen this movie several times over the years. I think it was one that I actually might have had on like a DVD Blu-ray combo. And maybe it even came with like the digital code for Ultraviolet, if you remember that strange window of time.
Yes.
But yeah, last night I actually rented it, the unrated version. So I have some even more material to remember now. But yeah, I was fond of it then and I'm fond of it now.
You mentioned the window of time and the like the Blu-rays and all this other stuff. And my overall thoughts of this, and Andy, before we get into the first game of the show, watching this, I was looking back at this and just thinking 2005 was such a specific time in history where as I'm watching this movie, there was so much stuff that was like, that was only in 2005 that this was a thing, like the eBay store and all this other stuff. I was just like, how 2005 is this? And it was like a time capsule, more so than any of the other movies we've watched, which made it a real treat. Andy, what were you thinking going into this one?
Well, for one, I was excited to be with Tommy. So, and I think we picked a good one. This is going to be a fun one. Well, I think this movie, when it first came out, Steve Carell wasn't what he is today. Like it was kind of like, wait, he's the leading man of this. So it was interesting when I first saw it. But now you see like the people that are in it. You're like, oh yeah, most of these people have been the lead in their own movies several times. So it's very cool to kind of go back and check it out.
This movie, you're right. Everyone in it no one was a made person in this when they were in it yet. I think Steve Carell was coming off the first season of The Office when this came out, which I don't think the first season of The Office was actually that successful even. But everyone else in it, there's a ton of stars, but none of them were people that you could bank on just yet. And that said, Tommy, this is the first game we play in the. We have 2 games we play. There's a lot of games here, and there's not even really much of a game. But what we're going to do is I always like to see if Andy can guess the Rotten Tomato score, and then you're going to guess if the real score is higher or lower than what Andy guesses.
Comedies are so hard.
Yeah, Andy, what do you think?
Tommy, I got to say, I've been doing pretty well in this lately, but before that, I was doing horribly. So decide however you'd like to go.
He's gotten good at this, but just so you know, Andy, the movies we're coming off of: Spider-Man 2, Mystic River, and now 40-Year-Old Virgin. This was a sharp turn of movies. But Andy, taking all that into consideration, where do you think the 40-Year-Old Virgin landed?
Well, can I add that you said 50 cents, get rich or die trying, as if we needed to know it was 50 cents, get rich or die trying.
Yeah, it could have been someone else's.
Yeah, so it had to go against that. So that's tough. Comedy usually doesn't get some good scores, but Judd Apatow, pretty early on Judd Apatow movies. I'm going to go like this got pretty good. I remember like people really liking this. I'll go like 75.
75 is very high for a comedy. Was this Judd Apatow's first big one?
I think this was kind of the put him on the map, like household name kind of thing.
So that said, 75, Tommy, do you think the real score is higher or lower than 75%?
I'm going to have to say higher.
Ooh.
Higher.
Yeah.
Rotten Tomatoes has this movie sitting at 85%.
Ooh, Tommy.
Puts it right next to Mystic River and Spider-Man, which I think were 88 and 86 respectively. So 2 all-time legendary beloved movies. The 40-Year-Old Virgin right up there with them, but I bet it didn't win any awards. Academy.
Hey, maybe on a future season of your show, you can start counting from 0 Rotten Tomatoes score all the way up to 100.
Well, we just reviewed Scorpion King, so we're pretty close.
Okay.
We got it about as close to 0 as you're going to get.
Famously won the Academy Award for Best Digital Effects.
It's that is a if you have nothing to do and you see Scorpion King is available for rent, find something else.
Read a book.
Digital colonoscopy.
Yeah, it's actually shocking. Watch that movie and remind yourself that The Rock becomes the biggest star in Hollywood after that. And it's a very weird, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting thing.
Yeah. Somebody predicted that.
But before we get into the movie, I always like to take a second to quickly thank everyone who's watching the show on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or iHeartRadio. It's always appreciated, but we do it for a reason, and we do it for likes, comments, shares, subscribes, 5-star reviews. So give us a 5-star review and leave a little comment. Why don't you? It's the least you could do. It's free to do. The only reason you're not doing it is because you're a jerk. So leave a 5-star review. Why don't you?
Pretty aggressive call to action.
I don't play games, Tommy. That's all I'm asking is a 5-star review.
Jack's going to start making house visits.
Not these 4-star review crap.
Yeah. We don't want
that
a 4
like
or
and
a 3.
subscribe, or I will hunt you down and I will hit you.
Some people try to say it nice. I'm not playing. I do it for the 5-star reviews. I pay my rent with 5-star reviews. All right. Let's get started. Our hero wakes up in the morning and gets ready for work. Toys and collectibles are all over his home as he rides a bike to work at Tech City. Andy's coworker talks about his trip to Tijuana, and the only story Andy has is about eating an egg salad sandwich. The sales guys fight about sales as Michael McDonald plays on the TV screens, and they're all planning a card game and need a 5th, so they invite Andy. At the poker game, Andy is better than everyone thinks, and everyone is telling stories of being with women from gross to romantic. When it's Andy's turn to tell a story, he clearly doesn't have one. He makes it up, he gets caught, and they find out that Andy is a virgin. And the fellas all laugh at him. Tommy, I always like to start with this first question. This is the beginning of the movie. Tell us about the world that we are going to live in and the characters that inhabit it.
Wow. It's famously, a lot of good comedies start with a montage. This one is no exception. We get his whole breakfast scene, very, very controlled morning, very by the book. clearly somebody whose mornings are never interrupted by waking up with someone in their bed. And rides his bike to work. We get our Circuit City knockoff, which is another blast from the past that we talked about earlier. Just a physical electronics store.
Right.
What a concept. We meet the sales guys. We got Paul Rudd, we got Seth Rogen, Jane Lynch is in there, solid crew.
A variable who's who of the future of comedy. You mentioned Tech City, Circuit City knockoff. I bought this polo that I thought was really nice. And then I did one of these shows. Like, it looks like I work at Circuit City. So I wore it in honor of Tech City today for this show, because it looks like I'm wearing a Circuit City shirt.
I think it's called Smart Tech, isn't it?
I think
or is it Tech City?
The blue polo is a Best Buy uniform, Jack. So
Best Buy. Oh, sorry.
No,
jeez.
I'm sure if they were still open, their lawyers
we got some continuity errors.
Go change.
But you, Tommy hit on something here, Andy, and it's funny to me. The unsaid message is, to me, this guy's life is going great without someone else to worry about. I mean, his house is clean. He's getting a workout in the morning. He's got hobbies. He's making a good breakfast. He's even riding a bike to work. Like, they try to make this guy look like a loser. I'm like, this guy has his life in control.
Especially like Seth Rogen's story sounds terrible. His weekend that he's talking about. I'm like, I'd much rather have an egg salad sandwich weekend.
How old are we? So I'm like, yeah, an egg salad sandwich does sound kind of nice.
That sounds pretty good. Yeah, I could go get the materials. I just got to say, the first thing, I always write notes each time we do this, and my first note says Steve Carell with boner. Like, literally, they start the movie with Steve Carell with a boner, and it's like super obnoxious looking, which is lovely.
Does nothing to adjust it, by the way. Just rolls with
no attempt to combat the
I'm gonna bring this up multiple times throughout this movie, Tommy, but I feel like this movie was the last bastion of people with jobs that are living in places that their job could in no way, shape, or form afford them to live in. And I'm looking at Andy in this movie, Steve Carell. And he works at a Best Buy Circuit City kind of place, but he's got like a 5-bedroom house in Los Angeles, because he's got like a workout room. He's got a bedroom. He's got a collectibles room. This guy, there's no way he's living in a place. I feel like if you did that movie today, you'd be like, come on, dude, this guy can't live here.
Yeah. And especially, it's 2005. We're just a few years out from, the big bust. So
right. So you're saying that you think he was?
I'm saying he definitely has a subprime mortgage with an adjustable rate.
Andy from the 40-Year-Old Virgin is the reason the stock market collapsed. You heard it here first, folks. Folks. So this is the start, and just very fun getting to see all these characters, and everyone looks so young. By the way, it was
Paul Rudd looks the same.
I mean, Paul Rudd's the same age as he's always been.
This is actually one of the older looking Paul Rudds that I've seen.
Yeah,
I watched
he looks
Clueless
older now
recently, and you're like, oh, look at that baby. And then I saw him somewhere else, like a current photo, and I'm like, yeah, Paul Rudd. And I feel like this 40-Year-Old Virgin's a strange dip in his ageless appearance.
Oh, I am on the record of saying I don't think he's on our timeline. I think he's somehow bouncing around. For him, he's been making 20, like for us, we're like, oh, he's been in movies for 30 years. He's actually only been alive for like 5 or 6 years tops, I think, for him. He's just been
this clone of him. Yeah.
He's just, a clone. Maybe it is a clone. Because this one did look older than Ant-Man.
Yeah.
Maybe you guys should add The Sixth Day to your list there.
That would be that actually is a great one to go back and
I love that one.
So do I, actually,
because it's probably terrible. So I'd love to go back. I love when we review the terrible movies. Those are my favorite ones.
Can we talk about those? Steve Carell talking about the women's breasts being sand, and his whole story about she wanted me to talk dirty to her. Like, the whole story is just so funny. Like, he just does such a great job of he's kind of getting their attention, and then like, and then he knows he messes up. And what does he say? Like, he's like, they're not even gonna remember. And then he wakes up in the morning, and when he says, "What say? This is going to be bad. This is gonna be bad." He said, and then he says, "They go, are you a virgin?" He goes, "Yeah, not since I was 10." This the whole thing's so funny. I think he says borked.
They do the reveal really well because you're right. None of the guys in that group at the poker table get it right away, and you can kind of see them all slowly going, "Wait a minute, what is this?" And I was seeing from an acting standpoint, you wouldn't just figure it out right away. There would be this slowly like, "Wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. What's he talking about?" And like, but then I like that it's the sand thing is what gives him away.
Even yells at sand.
What?
And I love like little character things. I just noticed during that scene, they're all drinking alcohol and he's drinking an orange Fanta. I don't know. I just thought it was funny. I'm like, that's such a perfect drink for his character.
It is a perfect. He's very much. I was watching this, Tommy, and I was thinking before we get into the next spots here, this feels very much like a beta version, alpha version, or whatever, a pre-release version of what Michael Scott is in a lot of ways, watching this.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think, and especially early when you're kind of bursting onto the like movie screen, there's a certain shtick that like a comedic actor kind of leans into. So, yeah, I'm sure Steve Carell's kind of in that realm of like uncomfortable person. You know. I also like that they kind of build a good hierarchy in the store in the beginning here, where what is he? He like works in this like inventory or something.
Yeah,
I think so.
Just like bottom feeder, entry level type stuff, and the sales guys, it's like, oh yeah, blue polos. You're like,
that is a good point. That I do like the hierarchy there, and I like that there's different personality. Like the guys who are the sales guys do act like they would be the sales guys, and Seth Rogen acts like he would be the stock guy that doesn't really care and is kind of whatever, where the other guys are chatting the whole time and talking and moving fast and have a little bit of that sales guy vibe to them. So actually, good world building. So the next day, Andy isn't very excited about work, and he shouldn't be. Everyone knows he's never knocked boots, and everyone is giving him a hard time about it. David offers to help, and Andy agrees to go out with the guys that night. However, now he's seen sex everywhere and has nightmares remembering his failed sexual exploits. At the club, Jay says Andy needs to use his instincts to hit on drunk women. That leads him to Cal, who gets them to a bachelorette party, and things are going well as Andy starts going home with one of the girls there, but she's a little too drunk to drive, and it's a harrowing experience that ends in an accident and a face full of vomit. While breaking some lights the next day, the fellas have a post-mortem on where Andy went wrong. In the store, a woman needs help, and the sales guys leave it to Andy to handle, and Andy gets the woman's number, so the fellas go out to celebrate. They tell Andy to have sex with women he doesn't care about first before going for the woman he does care about. They grab some drinks and have some fun, and the next day he decides to call the girl at the eBay store, but he hangs up on her when he gets nervous. Jay convinces Andy he needs to work on his appearance, and Andy, walk us through this wax scene.
Oh my God, it's so good. It is so good. What is Paul Rudd calls it? You look like a man-o-lantern. that part is so great because it's really happening. He's really getting waxed. I read this thing that the girl that waxed him almost ripped his nipple off because she didn't know to put like some kind of Vaseline on it. And I guess Judd Apatow was like, whoa, wait. But the things he's yelling is so funny. I mean, the Kelly Clarkson one's probably the most memorable one, but that whole part is just so good. It's so funny.
I've read that he ad-libbed all that, and
it had to be.
I don't know if it's true or not, but this scene has to be the iconic scene of this movie. Is the chest waxing. Andy, I know you're a hairy fella, so I was thinking to myself, have you ever had your chest waxed, and was it similar to this?
I have had my chest waxed, but I'm a pretty hairy guy, but I cannot compete with Steve Carell. He's like a wolf man when they say like, why don't you take off your sweater or something? I think it's painful. Yeah, but I don't have Steve Carell's
Yeah.
woolly
I,
woolly body.
I noticed there's when she does like a smear on like the low belly kind of belly button height,
Yeah.
and there's a little play in the skin when you get down there, and I think that would have a little, the skin is gonna give first, and then the hair needs to come, and then rip. So it's kind of like a double hit there, and I could tell that one was excruciating, particularly.
There's a little give in the skin. So Tommy, I want to talk to you a little bit about David, the Paul Rudd character here. And I love how he is obsessed with this girl who he dated 4 months, and it's been 2 years, and he's just devastated by this. Tell us a little bit about Paul Rudd's character and his failed love.
Yeah, I mean, he's really hung up on our sweet Mindy Kaling there, as the reveal turns out to be. He thinks he's probably at the poker scene, just to jump back to that, his sappy story after they're like, oh yeah, they're talking about like dirty sex exploits that they had, and then he's like, it's like our souls merged. I didn't know where my body ended and hers began. And everyone's like, shut up with that. And you're because it is this like, they're just like, go out there and have sex. And he's taking this like very emotional, like, oh yeah, it's a spiritual communion of our love.
I love the slow reveal too about how not important that relationship really was. Like, he's so into it. It starts like, oh yeah, I'm still hurt. This girl broke my heart. She meant the world to me. And then you find out it was 2 years ago. And then later you find out it was for 4 months. And then later you find out like she's been like never did anything wrong. She just broke up with it.
Yeah. I did not know that.
Andy, I want to talk about the way the world has sort of changed since this movie came out. And it was interesting during the poker scene. We're supposed to believe Andy's this big nerd and this loser, but he's like, yeah, so I play poker and I play Halo. And I was thinking, if that was today, people like, that dude sounds like a normal guy. Like in 2005, I guess maybe games weren't as popular or whatever, but now I'm like, yeah, it sounds like, I bet most people his age probably play Halo and that kind of stuff if they're single.
I was even thinking when he's playing the tuba, I'm like, yeah, good for you, learning an instrument. Like, what else are you gonna do? It seemed like he was making the most of his time. He wasn't just sitting there watching like Netflix or something. Well, I guess they didn't have it then. But the thing I really wanted to chat about, though, I think the shaving of the chest is probably the most memorable part. Like, every time I think of this movie, I think of that. But Leslie Mann as the drunk girl in the car is amazing. Like, what she's talking about, like, let's get some French toast, and she falls asleep while she's driving, and she's just like dancing. She hits cars. Just the way she's talking to her, she's like, "Am I pretty?" Like, the whole thing is so.
Get your hands off the steering wheel.
Yeah, she's so good in like everything. But in this, I don't think I had. Maybe Big Daddy is before this, but I hadn't really seen her in too much, and it was just like, she just kills it, just like giving her like one scene and just go nuts. And then obviously the puke is, it's ridiculous. Did you have an actor?
I love the idea of a shellfish sandwich.
And then when they kiss, he's like, that tasted like shellfish.
That's hard to say.
She's like, look at me. You're not looking at me. Look at me.
She's not watching The Road. Missy Elliott's on. It's just like she's rapping Missy Elliott. Just like, it's so good. It's so funny.
But to go back to it too, Tommy, I know we've mentioned it before, but 2005 was just such a, I didn't realize how specific of a year it was. Like, she's buying the VCR DVD combo thing.
Yeah.
She is. Like, how long were those around and how dated does that feel? But also, she works at We Sell Your Stuff on eBay.
That's the funny thing.
I think that those stores were around for like 9 months. If anyone listening works at one of those stores, I don't apologize. You probably should look for new employment.
I don't get that store.
And then also just like of course the Missy Elliott, but like her hat she was wearing, Leslie Mann's hat she was wearing, and the style was so. That was 2005 to a T. And if you had asked me before I watched this movie, like, what was the style? Like, I don't know. I don't really know if there is one, but I watched this movie. I was like, oh my God, that is 2005.
Yeah, this is the era where you know Kelly Clarkson walked on the red carpet in a dress with jeans on underneath it. Like people were doing some weird stuff back in the day there. Strange times.
I liked her line too. I wrote, she says, "Who's your name again?"
It's funny because I was thinking about the eBay store thing, and how Steve Carell, Andy in the movie, was he was like confused. Like, so you sell people's things online? Like, I don't get it. But I was thinking that's actually kind of the way it works now. Like Amazon basically just sells people's stuff online for them. So
yeah, you know, it's fun to talk about like all the Seinfeld plots that
Yeah.
you know, whole episodes of Seinfeld were built on things that are just a smartphone just completely does away with that. There's a certain quality of that to 40-year-old virgin where like, you know, modern times just wouldn't permit a plot like this to unfold, because just like an eBay store or, you know, a Circuit City that's swarming with people and salesmen on the floor.
right, that are fighting over like commissions and like, I want to be here at the busy time. There's not a busy time anymore, pal.
Yeah, but you know, to the writer's credit, they do have Catherine Keener clock that the VCR DVD combo is going to be outdated in 6 months, and they were not wrong.
No, not at all. I had one of those, by the way. The VHS never got used, but but it did make me hold on to some VHS tapes I should have gotten rid of way sooner. Andy, my last
was one of them Boner Jams.
2003 had the best Boner Jams, though. If we're being honest. I want to ask you, Andy, what is your peripheral vision like? Is it good?
What?
Remember when they were making the eye contact and like you got to look through your peripherals?
Oh, I don't think I remember that. What part did I fall asleep at that part?
Jay was
they're like at the club and he's like, check out that chick over there, and he looks right away and he's like, don't look at her directly. You gotta see her peripherally.
I gotcha.
Peripheral. So I guess you don't have peripheral vision.
I guess mine's terrible.
That went right over your head. Tommy's got the peripheral.
Huh?
I do. Yeah. I did want to say the first thing that I was just going to kind of like experience the movie and watch it, but I definitely did open up a note on my phone and pause the movie because I was cracking up at some kind of throwaway details. Everyone's confronting him about him being a virgin in the store, and he runs out and he's like, oh God. And then he sees all these like sex things going on.
Eruption.
He goes to he goes to a magazine stand and like, you know, you see your standard like Cosmo, and the cover of that one is like pre-sex, and you're like, okay, yeah. And Cosmo, you know, it's famous for its terrible like sex advice, whatever. And I had to write down the other ones. So there was one called Purse Dogs, and and there was just a woman standing there topless. And then there was Canoe Times was the next one, and it was like asses up in the bending over the edge of a canoe.
I didn't get that. That was the uncut version.
Is this unrated content?
I guess so. Cause I didn't get that.
Wow.
Did you, Jack?
Yeah. I mean, this was a great thing. Maybe that's why I was so enamored with it. And after Canoe Times with the asses, it cut to Extreme Tourist. And it was a woman, again, topless, but she was in a jungle and vines were kind of Lady Godiva-ing down over her breasts. And then there was one called Consumer Medication with and the cover was about self breast exams, and it was just a woman like in a mirror. Like all of it was boobs.
That's so funny.
And then that bus with the eruption pulls up and he can't escape it. So that just that really had me going. I had to rewind.
That is
Canoe Times.
Canoe Times. The
Canoe Times really did me in.
So after this, while carrying out a TV, Cal says that Andy needs to play the odds and just try to hook up with everybody. So Cal continues to say it's about asking questions. So they go to the bookstore where Elizabeth Banks is working, and he asks her questions, and it works. With the new confidence, he calls Trish, but he chickens out, and the whole thing goes poorly when she thinks he is a telemarketer. The next day, the fellas go to a speed dating lunch, and it doesn't go well. David runs into Amy. Jay pretends to be a doctor, and Andy has a range of interactions, none of them good. Andy, David dropped off some porn. Walk us through that scene.
And Everybody Loves Raymond.
That's a good show.
Boner Jams 03 is so funny because they do mention it a few times. I forget, was it Boner Jams with a Z? I really hope so.
I can't remember, but that sounds 2005.
It should be. Yeah. But the
2003, I should say.
Yeah. The Datapalooza is amazing too with Gina.
I gotta ask, Tommy, if Andy's not having sex, what is a box of porn going to do to help him? I'm sure he has plenty of it if he's not having sex. What is that going to do?
I don't know. I mean, if he's to be believed, he just doesn't really engage in any sexual activity with others or himself. So, you know.
I love the way that David left, just shouting that, like, no, I don't want your porn.
It's a classic move. It really shuts down the conversation because Andy still has to keep living there with his neighbors, and then they know about his giant porn collection.
It is great
that he was trying to get a dude to watch it with him. No, Andy, I don't want to watch Boner Jams 03 with you.
Boner Jams.
Oh, actually, while we're on the porn thing, what I did not realize until this viewing, because this is my first viewing post 2015, that Stormy Daniels makes a cameo here,
Really?
who now famous on an international stage for other reasons. But
does she have the biggest career after this?
Yeah, probably.
It's what a interesting cameo looking back on.
She was in Space Nuts.
Yes.
I think that's what he watches, Space Nuts.
That was her that's what she's most known for now. Today.
That's the one I know of.
I want to Tommy, talk to us about this speed dating, which was a very fun scene that we knew was going to go bad, and just the array of people that these guys talk to.
Yeah, I think particularly with Steve Carell, this scene is great because it's a very salient moment for all of the dating advice that he's been given from his friends. Really kind of starts blowing up in his face, which is a good area to kind of mine comedy from as the movie goes beyond this. So, he sits down with that first woman, and his strategy is the Elizabeth Banks strategy, where he's just going to turn everything she says back into a question at her. And she's just like, what is going on right now? Right. He meets, oh gosh, I can't think of her name. Gina, yeah, who I also didn't recognize because post Parks and Rec, but that's Joan Calamezzo.
Oh yeah,
Gina. She wants to slap a little rouge on him. All the rest. Pretty disastrous turn of events there.
Was the Amy? Was her name Amy? I can't remember. David's ex-girlfriend, Amy. Yeah, was it Mindy? Was that a cameo that we recognized at the time, Andy, or was she still unknown when that happened?
I mean, I think she was just on The Office probably, and I don't think we really knew Mindy Kaling yet.
Because when she sat down, I was like, oh, and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't think I had that reaction. I think I was just like, oh, yeah, that's Amy. But again, everyone seemed to grow from this movie. But
speaking of grow, that girl with her boob that shook out of her dress.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
that was
from a really safe small town, Wisconsin.
That was so preposterous that
she wouldn't feel that
her boob was going to shake out of her dress. Some guy obviously wrote that.
It was he's just like tugging at his collar. He's like,
I mean, I always imagine like the director or the writer when they get the actress there and being like, so this is what's going to happen. Your boob's going to come out. And no, we're not putting, it's just going to stay out. You're just going to do the scene, but with your boob out. Like, I feel like, how do you not feel like a creep when you're like pitching that to them? It's funny, but I'm trying to imagine before you get there and trying to pitch that scene to her. How do you not feel like a creep as you're talking about that scene with them? But I don't know.
They're
but
professionals. They know.
I
Sometimes
love
your
the
cast for a bit part.
as they were leaving. My favorite bit was Seth Rogen being like, "You know who I thought was the hottest, and you're not going to believe me, but Gina." It's just, I don't know. His delivery on that was perfect.
What did she say to him? She says, I'll take you home, tuck your sack back, or something like that.
So yeah, slap a little rouge on you and take your sack back.
I want to get back on the pogo stick.
So silly.
Oh, it was such a mess. But then I was thinking about it. What kind of people do you expect to find at a lunchtime speed dating meetup?
I thought about that. Those guys, they all have lunch at the same time. Each of them gets to leave the store. And does the store close? It's literally like half the staff.
That's why Amazon's putting them out of business.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I think about it too. Another problem that's kind of solved by modern technology is just like speed dating is now like an app. So
yeah. Yeah, if they had an app back then, this whole thing wouldn't happen. They would have said set up a Tinder and bing bang boom.
Yeah, I would imagine that people were probably still putting personal ads in like local newspapers at this stage. God, maybe some were kind of working their way online. Or
I feel so old knowing that you're right
about
that. But
MySpace could meet some people that way.
So the next day, David is struggling at work after seeing Amy, so Andy gets put in sales to replace him for a little bit, and he chickens out talking to a girl right off the bat, but that just gets Jay to invite Andy to a, quote, party. This upsets Andy to the point that he marches into the eBay store and talks to Trish, and they hit it off until Jonah Hill wants to buy some glittery shoes. The fellas are playing Mortal Kombat and talking trash to each other while Andy calls Trish and invites her over. The fellas say that all the nerdy stuff in Andy's apartment will ruin everything, so they empty the apartment completely empty, and Andy and Trish go to a restaurant, and it goes great, so they end up at Trish's place, and before Andy can get a condom on, Trish's kids walk in, but he does have an erection that lasts over 4 hours. Tommy, this is where I feel like the whole movie was prelude to this part where Andy's actually starting the relationship with Trish here. Tell us about his budding relationship and how he's doing and getting to know Trish.
Yeah, he has several run-ins with her, calling the number she gave him and not even being brave enough to identify himself on the phone. Also pre-caller ID days. So he's like,
again, feeling old.
Gets accosted as like a telemarketer. She's pissed about that. Tells him to go shoot himself.
Jump off a building.
So some violent end. But yeah, they really hit it off. She's very sweet with him. I particularly like the moment where she picks him up at his apartment because he doesn't drive a car, and she's mistaken because he's like, "Oh, I ride a bike." And she's like, "Oh, I love getting on the back of a motorcycle." He's like, "Oh yeah, I ride a bicycle." But then his excuse for having an empty apartment when she's like, "Oh, did you just move in?" He's like, "Oh, I'm having carpeting put in tomorrow," which is such a throwaway thing that actually comes back up later, which I never noticed, and I actually think that is one of the funniest things in the whole movie. But yeah, Catherine Keener is brilliant. She's a good foil for the other Bankses and the other romantic pursuits.
The bachelorette party girl.
Yeah.
Gina, yeah, as opposed to, this was it's funny, the carpet line, something I always think about from this movie, and I don't even intentionally do it, but it comes up all the time, is maybe if we pull up the hardwood, there's carpet underneath. For some reason that cracks me up.
So funny.
Every time it'll seriously like just randomly pop into my mind for the past however many years. And every time I see a hardwood floor, I think that. I wonder if you pull it up, there's carpet underneath it.
That's really funny.
For some reason, I really dig that. But Andy, I want you to talk to us about how we see Andy in this movie take the heat for Jay when his girlfriend or wife, whatever, Jill, finds out that he's at a speed dating.
Hurting for a squirting.
Ho for ho for show.
Hell for show.
For show.
It's so good. I mean, Andy's such a nice, likable guy. That's why you feel like so bad for him when he has his little condom extravaganza. Like that part is so insane. He's literally just, it reminds me of like a 13 or 14-year-old boy or something that's just like has no idea what to do with these things. The time where he blows it up like a balloon and tries to put it on and it like snaps.
I love how her daughter comes in and is like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And then she looks at the pile of wrappers. It's like, "Ah,
how many times did you just have sex?"
And the boyfriend's like, "Teach me."
Yeah, that was so good. That boyfriend had one line and he nailed it.
That's all he needed.
Yeah, a lot of good like young actors with one-liners in this one. Later, when they go to the sex clinic, we got some more good ones in there.
We got some very good ones, and I have to bring it up because this is just too funny to me. Was when he calls the place, he's like, "Yeah, I'm calling because you said to call if I have an erection that lasts more than 4 hours." It's like, yeah, but it's if you used our product. Oh, okay.
Well,
never mind.
He gets specific. He's like, well, I can't personally help you. I'm in Bombay, India.
He's like, if you flick your balls a couple times. It's like I was like, yeah, that'd probably work. Probably handle that situation pretty quickly.
But what about Jonah? Jonah Hill, again, just another guy that's like in the movie. I was cracking up the whole time with him in that scene. For one, the boots he was buying, I really wanted to see later scene. That's one thing, Jack, like you said, sometimes we get things in movies and then we don't get the payoff. I feel like we didn't get the payoff. I wanted to see Jonah Hill with these boots at his place, but I guess that was the whole point. He couldn't buy him there. but even the confusion there, which made total sense. He's like, wait, so yeah, I can't buy these? No, you could get them on eBay, but I want them now. Like, it's just like super funny.
That first off, was that Jonah Hill's first movie scene? Or is this after something with him in it? Because I don't remember him. He looked pretty young in this movie. He looked younger than Superbad.
Yeah, when was Superbad? Probably maybe the year after this.
Superbad came out around like 07 or 08.
But that's another thing that pops up in my head all the time where it's like, yeah, if I give you the money and you give me these, you're making it really difficult. Whenever I'm dealing with customer service or someone that is making life difficult, I'm always like, look, I'm trying to buy something, make it easy for me. I always think of this scene where he's like, just
when you're trying to buy those boots, Jack.
When I'm trying to buy those boots, because I want to go home and wear them. I like how he specifies too, so I can go home and wear them. So Andy's doing great at work, and he moves to sales permanently. And his boss is offering to be a buddy. He declines, but the fellas say he needs to tell Trish he's a virgin. So Andy takes Trish to a nice restaurant, and she talks about her kids and that maybe they should hold off on sex. Instead of telling Trish, Andy just agrees. So back at her place, Andy meets the kids again, and they aren't impressed. And neither is Cal, who calls Trish a Jack Palance grandma. But his boss is impressed, and she makes him a floor manager. And his first job as floor manager is to deal with Jay, who is an emotional wreck because Jill left him. And now Jay understands a good relationship doesn't need sex. Then we get a montage of Trish and Andy's relationship and the dates counting down to the 20th one. Andy wants to open up his own store, which I'm sure will work out great as the internet continues to grow. But Andy also decides to sell his collectibles to achieve that dream. Andy's also getting good at being a manager and managing the family as he takes Trish's daughter to Planned Parenthood. There they learn about sex, and Trish's daughter admits it's obvious that Andy is a virgin. Tommy, you had mentioned it before. Tell us about this Planned Parenthood scene, because I think this is a forgotten standout moment for me.
Love this one. And another thing with, present day eyes looking back on that, the counselor that's running that discussion group is eventually goes on to play one of Steve Carell's girlfriends on The Office and is famously his real life wife. Yeah. So I always thought that was funny. But yeah, I mean, that
Nepotism, getting
scene
her
is
jobs. I
genius,
can't believe-
where it's just, even now all these teenagers that are in the room have all had sex, and the parents are piling up on Steve Carell also. They're like, oh yeah, I'm a virgin.
Yeah.
What does he say? Is it true that you really lose it? What does he say?
Is it true that if you don't use it, you lose it? Is that a serious question?
he keeps trying to ask the questions like hypothetically or like for the daughter, but it's clearly for
yeah,
him.
yeah.
Such
Even him looking at the model of the vagina, he's like, where does the penis go?
But this was another one where like you have the guy from Reno 911 in there, a bunch of famous people in this. But speaking of famous people, Andy, there's a client customer confrontation with Jay starring one Kevin Hart.
I had no idea he was in this movie. Like it's crazy to think, like, again, these small parts that him, Jonah Hill.
Is that a hype joke?
What? No. He's probably just a little shorter than I am. But no, this to have these smaller parts, and then all of a sudden they Kevin Hart's headlining his own movie. So is Jonah Hill. Kat Dennings has had her own show. Like it's crazy. This how well people did after this movie. Elizabeth Banks we talked about too. Like, she's gone on to have this crazy career. So it was cool seeing him. I had no idea.
It felt weird him being in this movie. Like, I felt like, wait, you're not supposed to be in this movie. This isn't like you're a different type of comedian. This is a different type of comedy. What are you doing here? It was it would be like if Jim Carrey walked in and you'd be like, wait, no, like you're a great comedian, but this isn't like one of your movies. This is you're in the wrong place or something.
Yeah, it was very strange. I had to look twice. I'm like, that guy looks like Kevin Hart. But I mean, there's not a lot of guys that it's Kevin Hart, Yeah. You're not like, oh yeah, I think I saw Kevin Hart today. Oh no, you would know.
It was a funny scene. It was just like, wait, Kevin Hart? Wait, what's he doing here? So this was interesting because as a movie, as I'm taking notes and as I'm watching this little bit here was all funny stuff, but this is where I was starting to think, did we really need to go over 2 hours in this movie? Was there some stuff that maybe could have hit the Tommy, you don't know this, but I get very frustrated when a movie goes over 2 hours and there's not anything you can cut out, or there's stuff you could cut out. I feel like once you go over 2 hours, everything needs to be mandatory. You can't have just
especially in a comedy.
Yeah, I was a little concerned with my own viewing because I watched the unrated version, so there was stuff that obviously had been cut and scenes that were feeling a little over long, and I felt like, oh, maybe that's because I watched like a director's cut or something. So it's funny hearing you watching the theatrical one that you still felt that way, because I had the same thought.
I mean, they were funny. Like there wasn't any scenes where I was like, oh, that wasn't even funny, but it was just like I said, I live in a Twitter world where everything's very short and condensed, and so I'm like, I miss the days of the 90-minute movie, Tommy. I remember the days where you get an hour and a half, and it was you were in, you were out, it was good, and we get these 2.5 hour movies, and I'm like, well, you didn't really need that.
Yeah, we had them all in I feel like all of our 90s movies we reviewed were all like in that sweet spot. That sweet 90s hour and 30 minutes.
Now they're all pushing 3 hours, it seems like. I mean, come on. I mean, if sometimes I'm like, okay, you couldn't have cut anything out. I get it. You needed it all in there. But I felt like there were some scenes in here that were just added for funsies. And this movie's not about funsies. This movie's about serious things that are mandatory. But let's get to the end of this movie already. As it's the 20th date, it's time for these two to have sex. But Andy chickens out and has second thoughts about selling his toys. And Andy and Trish fight, so he leaves a virgin. Speaking of fighting, Jay and Jill are back together and they're having a baby shower at a club. But while there, David finally hits on his coworker and they make out. And Andy goes home with the bookstore girl. She hops in the tub and it's all systems go. But Andy has second thoughts again. And his friends are there to back him up on his decision. Andy heads home. Andy heads home and finds Trish digging through his box of guilty pleasures. And she runs in
Boner
fear.
jams.
Andy follows on his bike, and after getting into an accident, he admits to her he's a virgin, and Trish is understanding, and eventually they get married. We're told he made $500,000 off of the toys he sold, and after 2 hours and 1 minute of passion, he's just a 40-year-old. We're sung and danced out to the age of Aquarius. So the movie ends there, and I want to go back to the fight. Andy, I'm going to throw this to you. She says, I'm not trying to change you, but you ride a bike to work and work in a stockroom. That sounds to me like she's trying to change him.
Yeah, I didn't really like that scene too much. I kind of felt for Steve Carell there. He had his action figures that were important to him, and she was kind of making him change. You're right.
Yeah, I was like, what? This isn't love, Tommy. This to me, I'm watching this and I'm like, this girl is basically saying, yeah, get rid of all the things you care about, all the things you're passionate about, all the things you spent your life building so that you can make some money and give me a big wedding.
And he did.
What kind of message is that?
I'm keeping my baseball card.
I want to say the wedding was not necessarily, a premeditation on that part. I thought it was more, she's like, you could liquidate your toy collection that isn't doing anything and like pursue a dream. Now, opening an independent electronics store 18 months before the 07 bust, I don't know that there was such a happily ever after for these two.
No, this does not end well for them, especially he made a lot of money selling his stuff, but not like live off of it forever kind of money. Not in Los Angeles, not with the rent where it is today.
Well, and speaking of, you mentioned this earlier, and I had this down. I wanted to chat about. Elizabeth Banks works at a bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
Her place is amazing. Like she's got like this monster place. I'm like, she got a bathtub, like just like in a bookstore. I don't know. You probably would have like a 1-bedroom apartment. I'm just, unless I don't know, maybe you make more money at a bookstore than I knew.
No.
If
she also took out a subprime mortgage. I mean, really, it's a time capsule for people that are over leveraged on properties that they had no business taking out loans to buy.
Yeah, we should have seen the sequel to this.
That's the true, retrospective take on 40-year-old virgin.
You're right. All these people, it does not end well for any of these people.
Don't bite off more house than you can chew. All of them wound up in like suburb, like Henderson, Nevada, or something. At that, they definitely fled the area.
It's so specific.
It's very accurate too. I imagine. Because I actually had that on my list of things. Elizabeth Banks, no way she affords that place in on a mall bookstore associate paycheck.
Yeah. Can we just say, I mean, Elizabeth Banks is great. She gives a stellar performance as like the kind of like unhinged, like crazy in bed girl, and just does like such a good job. Everyone does
so good, and I love how Seth Rogen's character sticks around.
Yeah,
like it's so perfect.
I like how everyone's like, oh yeah, she's crazy. We all have keys to her house. What do you mean? Like,
yeah.
Now, I don't know how much extra my unrated version had, but there was like a meta scene where Steve Carell kind of stands in for the audience where she's using the shower nozzle, and he just says, "This is explicit."
Yeah. He says, "Oh, this is graphic" or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
it's graphic. Like. Yeah.
It's actually a great scene though, because you do like, he's drunk and he's like into this idea, and then like you see it in his face that he's like, oh no, this isn't what I like. It's actually like really good acting during that scene too.
It's like such a well structured finale. He has like the blow up with Catherine Keener and they separate, and you're just like, oh no, don't go to Elizabeth Banks, like make up with her and fix things. And he goes and has this like ego, like crisis of conscience, and winds up going back home. And this was like the scene that I had to rewatch because I literally just delivers like the best humor in the movie, at least on this viewing for me, is Catherine Keener going through all these things at his apartment. Because for the first time, like all their advice and stuff, like, oh, get the drunk chick, oh, here's a box of porn, all these things, it's like guy talk, and it's all between guys. And this is the first time that like a woman is laying eyes on what these men have like tried to turn Steve Carell into, and she's like horrified. And you know, you just see all these things. She's like boner jams 03, and it's just like, oh yeah, this is pretty shocking stuff. But she thinks he's a serial killer or something, and he's gonna get her. And this is the line I've been waiting for, because they set it up earlier when he's like, oh yeah, I'm having carpet put in tomorrow. The thing that like makes her flee for her life, she's like, no, and she like looks down, she's like, didn't get new carpeting. It's just this like deadpan moment. It's just like, it's the floors that give it away, and she runs out of the apartment, and the chase ensues.
And he keeps up with her for quite some time. I was thinking, I'm like, man, he's got some good cardio.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the carpet thing, because I noticed it for the first time this time around too, and I loved it. Also, I can't remember what the exact quote was, but like when they were in the street and the guy behind him honks his horn, is like, "Get out of the road, you virgin!" Or something like that.
That was great.
I love the big stunt. He flies through the truck panels, and he's like, "I hit both billboards."
So I guess to wrap it up, and Tommy, you're the guest, so you get the last words on this one. Going back and rewatching this, it was fun. It was interesting. It felt very much like, I would say though, that this movie felt very much like it kind of kicked off a style of comedy, maybe just the Judd Apatow style of comedy. And it was weird watching it now, and it didn't feel like it was quite as refined as what I guess it becomes later for Judd Apatow. So it was kind of interesting to watch it from a comedy standpoint, but also, just like I said at the beginning, everything about like the style, the way the clothes they were wearing, and the music that played throughout this movie, and the jobs and all this other stuff just felt so much like a time capsule. Really, one of my favorite things about this show is being able to go back and be like, no, that is specifically 2005. And so it was really fun to go back and watch. Some things age better than others in it, but overall it was a
there's some Me Too eyebrow raises in from where we stand now.
Yeah, there's definitely a few moments where I was like, ooh, yeah, that's not great, but it was still a fun movie to go back and visit. Andy, what did you think about the movie? Overall thoughts, and has anyone ever flicked your balls to motivate you to talk to a girl?
Usually you do. It was great. Yeah. I mean, it was great to see, like, I love Paul Rudd. So just to see, Paul Rudd, I feel like this is really his, like, from here, he just like skyrocketed, into all these comedy parts. I think Anchorman may have been the year before this, but really him just like knocking it out of the park, and same with Seth Rogen. So it was great just to see all these comedy kind of all-stars, all on the same playing field. And then all of a sudden now they're, all of them are, like I said before, like the lead of their own film or lead of their own show. So I thought it was great. It was great to kind of see Steve Carell's like kind of first leading man performance and see where he's gone from there. But super funny. I think a lot of the jokes kind of hold up. And I noticed there are a lot of the jokes I'd say in my, normal life. And I'm like, where did I get that from? And then, you see it in the movie. You go, oh, I do flick people in the balls from that movie.
I mean, I had forgotten how often I used to say the French toast line. And I'm happy to have dusted that one off. It's coming back big time in my life.
Good.
I just want to say that I do think that this was an interesting film, because I'm sure you guys have hit some other comedies, maybe like 90s, 80s type stuff, which I feel like definitely derives a lot more humor from like slapstick type elements. Whereas I do feel like this kind of this was very much like a character arc for Steve Carell. Like it's very focused on him like throughout, and his transformation. And I think that you can mine humor from just the lives that people are living without having to necessarily do like a Dumb and Dumber thing with a not to crap on Dumb and Dumber, but
careful.
No one's like petting a bird with a duct tape on head in this movie.
Right.
Bird.
Right. Yeah. It was a fun one. Tommy, thanks for joining us. But before we go, I always like to test Andy here, and I like you to be a part of it. I'm going to test Andy here. It's the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Can Andy connect someone from this movie to Kevin Bacon in 6 moves.
Yeah. Well,
this one, I feel like it's gonna be easy.
Yeah, it is. Steve Carell is in Crazy Stupid Love with Kevin Bacon.
Boo! Boo!
One-stop shop.
So Jean-Claude Van Damme is in.
Well, that was too easy, but hey, we're at an hour, so we're gonna wrap it up. Anyways, that does it for us. Next movie we're gonna go to 2006 to discuss The Pursuit of Happiness. Then we go to 2007 to talk about Hot Rod, and then we're doing 2008's Bronson. So some zigging and zagging with the different types of movies we're going to be watching. But it should be fun as always. Before we go, my name is Jack Farmer. You can find me at Real Jack Farmer across all social media. Andy, where can we find you and anything you're working on?
You can find me at Just Andy Rossi and find my film Dead Body at Amazon or Tubi.
Tommy, do you want people to find you? And if so, where can they find you and what you're working on?
No, I do not want to be found or contacted. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being on. That does it for the evolution of movies this time around, and we'll see you all next year.